Yeah.
Okay, we'll bring the Finance Committee to order. Steve, you good, right, bud? Okay, Finance Committee to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is financial update. Mrs. Barth.
All right, good evening. First I'll start on what I just passed out is last year's surplus. I only have a couple more days of analysis to make sure that that's where we're going to end up. But right now, due to the pandemic, there's a lot of areas that we've had a surplus in. We're still seeing those costs much lower than we've seen in a regular school year. So if you just take a look at the top, the revenues, we are receiving $400,000 more in revenues than what we budgeted. And if you take a look at the significant surplus, Wakefield tuition, we actually have more students from Wakefield this year, or this past year, than we have in the last 5 years.
Okay.
And what also compounds on top of that is the increase in the tuition rate. And then also what happens around March, April, we have a number of students that graduate early. And so I don't charge tuition from the time that the early graduation to the end of the school year. Usually I have at least a dozen. I have one. So that was a full tuition for all those students. So we're seeing a $377,000 surplus in that line. Special education aid, or it used to be CAD aid, we typically budget $600,000 because they tell us a range. And so they either tell us, you're going to get 60%, you're going to get 80%, we got 92%. So we got an additional $173,000 there. And again, Medicaid is where we had budgeted $700,000, but due to some of the laws changing, we only received $400,000, so we're seeing a deficit there, but overall an increase in revenues. On the expenditure side, we're seeing a $3.3 million surplus. And most of it is in salaries and benefits. So if you see where it says salaries aid, these were all the open positions we had with all the paras. And as you saw in personnel, we have 70 open positions. That's huge compared to other years. So we may have the same type of surpluses if we don't fill some of these positions. Subs, there was no need for subs, or subs were very hard to hire. Health insurance, we had a lot of health insurance changes, and then of course with the open positions, we didn't have to pay health insurance for those employees. But as you go down the list, the second area, student transportation and tuition, right there, that's special ed, a $1.7 million surplus. So this is where we're seeing at least half of our surplus. Kids weren't transported, again, due to COVID, due to the pandemic, or they didn't receive a lot of their services, or did not attend some of these schools that we had to pay tuition. Some of the other areas, in the next section, you can see some of the deficits that we had. Again, we bought some new equipment. We bought additional supplies that would relieve this year's budget. So that's where you're seeing a lot of the deficits, is because we did that spending to relieve fiscal year 22. Natural gas and electricity, we're over due to, again, the pandemic, running those systems 24/7. So as you can see, we have a very large surplus. And it was very hard to determine, even though I said, I reported 1.2, 1.5, some of these areas were already encumbered. So I wouldn't know until June or July whether, I didn't need it. So in working with Christian Allison, there was many services that were not. So again, that was 1/2 of the surplus that we have, which is very odd year to have a surplus in special ed.
Any questions for Linda?
So, when you projected out for next year, $2 million over the tax cap
We were close to 1.9,
for next year.
right.
I'm talking
I
about
mean,
for-
we're at the tax cap.
Yeah, but I'm
With
talking about
budget
for our
amendment.
next budget that we go to, it was around 2 million.
Yes.
Approximately. Is it worth us having a conversation with council or put a request in if we send this back where money can be put into a trust for the issue? I know it's kicking something that's already been discussed before, but this might be a year that they might be more aware of the challenges of the budget this past year.
So, if I may, we've had this conversation with councilors repetitively. And if you look at sister cities similar, like Dover, right, they're apple to apple pretty close. Dover has these trusts. We have a building trust, that's all they gave us. If we had a trust for specifically allocated lines, there are things that are high targets for us, special education, building construction, emergency management, those types of things. It'd be fine, but the city council is not gonna relinquish that control as of now. It's something I think we should probably approach again, because $3.3 million in the right fund is going to help us long term. But,
I was just saying, a portion of it.
I'm under the same mindset where if we can get half, if they do the same thing they did with what we do at the end of the year, like normally they put half of this into our reserve fund. If they do that, and we can allocate it to other things where they're specific to that, in the same setup, it'd be way more functional for us, because right now, if I'm correct, Kyle, and please slap me if I'm wrong, we can only use that in building or reallocate it to operational line, right? We cannot use it, so, perfect example, special ed was real low last year. Next year it spikes, we're going for supplemental. If we have a trust with that money allocated to it, we then can do it on our own. We're no longer putting the burden on the general fund, and it's money that was unallocated because of the current conditions.
Right.
That's it. It was not misuse, it was not mismanagement, it's just what it is. So, Mr. DeBoer.
Well, just to be clear, this isn't so that way people think that we're just trying to figure out a way to add the budget next year, and we can just take it from the fund. It's more of those moments throughout the year, like we've gone for supplemental, we're already taken care of because we know we're gonna have a completely different story this year, right, than last year. That's it.
Ms. Harry?
If the money goes into the general fund, can they earmark it, designate it within the general fund to be used for us?
So it
Could it
could
be a
be,
line item?
there is no format in that structure where they can benchmark it for us. The counselors can say that, but if you look at a recent, let's talk about the JVC funding for paving.
Yeah, that didn't come through. Yeah.
It really comes down to the way that they're gonna vote. It's dictated by the climate of the budget season. So it would be unfair of us to go, hey, earmark that for us just in case. They can't be held accountable for that, and we can't be held accountable. That's very, very hard to do. That's why the trusts are more viable. There's still control from both parties, and you have to agree to move the money in, but it's one of those struggles we have. Mrs. Stevens?
I lost my train with the
I'm sorry.
noise up there. Give me a
If
second.
it comes back around.
So just one thing to remind kind of the members of the board, each year there could be a surplus, in years past there has been recently. And so up to 50%, that's the way it's worded, I believe. It says up to 50% of surplus can be allotted to our capital reserve for building. Doesn't mean that 50% will go in. So there's no guarantee that half of what we're giving back would go back, because it's actually 50% of surplus across the city that could go into that, not just ours. So it's whatever the city has for surplus, whatever we have, it's what the language is, 50% of that total could go in. And it hasn't been that. I think it's fair to say it hasn't been that total. It's been a pretty stable number recently, correct me?
It actually has been 50%. Last year, there was no surplus, so no money went into it. So that's what happened in one of the years.
I remember my point now. Do you believe that it would be possible that our special ed costs are probably going to take a big jump because kids missed out on so many opportunities and services during the year when they were homeschooling, or do you think we'll have an increase?
It's hard to say just because of the variables related to that. students age out of programming, students meet goals and stop certain programming. A family that chose to homeschool could remain homeschool, so they could not hit the line again. Other families could choose to come back and then that would hit the line. So I think there's just so many variables, it would be hard to forecast that.
It would just be terrible to give all that money back and then be just crushed with, expenses.
So
Thank you.
I think it's important to reflect on what the reserve fund was actually built for. When Dan Harkinson put this in front of council, we went around and around and around about it, they agreed. And the conversation we're having right now is exactly the transit we're supposed to be using this reserve. If we have applicable funds we can put in there to pay down a building, to reduce debt service long-term, and still provide a quality product to the district and the city, which we've been getting grief about modulars and small schools forever, without putting a huge dent in our debt service, this is that venue. We need to use it for that specific conversation. So as we progress down this road, I'm hoping City Council understands it. We're building towards something here. We should probably start funneling something in there.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. Mrs. Harrington?
One more question for Linda. Where did food services end up for the year?
It had a deficit of $324,000.
Thank you.
Anything else for Mrs. Bartlett or in regards to that conversation? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I have a little bit more.
Oh, I'm ready. Go ahead, go nuts.
This is in relationship to our current year budget. We were just informed by the state that they're going to increase our advocacy aid by 1.3 million. So what they've done is looked at our ADM for 1920 and 2021, took the higher of the two and gave us the funding based on those figures. Whereas the number that's in the budget is based on the 2021 or the lower numbers. So it computes. Also, what they've done is give us some relief aid. And it depends on what school, and if you're 0 to 10 or 20 to 40, all based on free and reduced. We're getting that 1.3, 900,000 of that is part of that 1,000,003. Now, the kicker is, there's a state RSA 197 that states that we can only use that 1.3 million two ways. First, to reduce taxes, which if we would use it to reduce taxes, that now puts us more in a hole because of our being in the tax cap community. That lowers our raise to taxes. The only other way that we can spend these funds is have supplemental appropriation through the city council. Now, a lot of school districts will have to have a special meeting in order to increase their budget because of the increased revenue, or their taxes are gonna plummet. And that's what everyone's really talking about right now. Special town meetings are really hard to get, but I'm sure there's so many of them, and the amount of money, I'm sure that, I think you have to go through the Attorney General's office in order to get approval for a special town meeting. So, what we're recommending is to talk to the city and possibly go in front of the city council to ask for a supplemental appropriation to increase our budget by 1.3. I would like to put that 1.3 in a capital reserve fund, but I'm not sure the wording on the capital reserve fund funding is supposed to come from surplus. This is not coming from surplus, so I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. So I'd like to have a discussion as to ideas on, we can increase our budget, our revenue, our raised in taxes will stay the same, but we are projected to be 2 million over the tax cap in fiscal year '23. This will put us 2.6 million over the tax cap if we just let it go to taxes.
Mr. Collier.
Where we all sat here, went line by line, and got 1.3 million off the budget, can this just go into the budget?
That's
And
correct. Yes,
That's
we-
kind of your idea?
we could just put it right
I
into.
mean, if you need it, you have it into the reserve fund.
Right, I'm sure Dave Toddy would love to have a little bit of that money in his budget. But I think that's what's,
Just remind us about this. that-
Biggest smile we see out there.
but there's also a deadline.
So, we have a board meeting next week. So obviously, the board would have to do a final approval on you going for supplemental appropriation.
So, but the deadline, I don't know if she said,
October 1st.
council has to approve it by October 1st.
But we've got
What I'm saying is, we, by next week, need to know what we can do and where this can go. Can you get that information?
So,
Will we be?
No, not until after the
following.
in regard to the RSA and the allocation and where it's coming from, I think it's quintessential for us to make any educated decisions. I'm concerned about putting it back in the budget this year for the exact reason you just said. Anything we add comes up the other side next year. That's a problem. We can't dig a bigger hole, can't do it.
No.
So, in my opinion, personal opinion, that should go to the trust, completely tied to what we're talking about in every other facet. If we need it, we can move it. But if we throw it into our revenue lines now, Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, that impacts us for next budget. Tax cap compliance tells us we gotta hit a number we can't control. Let's not throw anything in our revenue line. We already trimmed all the fat, leave it off. Does that make sense?
Well, what would happen is your revenue would go up 1.3, but your expenditures would go up 1.3. It's what you spend that expenditure on. So it's not like, we can fill those holes that we cut, for this budget. It'd have to be like a one-time project or number of one-time projects.
And if we're gonna have a real conversation about a reno or a build, that helps. So, Mr. Boyer?
So at this point, we just need to kick the full board for next week.
Yeah, we don't need a motion right now, do we?
Do you need motion on finance, or do you want more?
I think,
Probably should.
I think you should take a motion of finance to recommend to the full board that we ask the city council for a supplemental appropriation of $1.3 million.
I agree with that. So I'll make the motion that we ask city council for a supplemental appropriation of 1.3 to be allocated to either trust or operations.
Came from the increase in the,
Correct.
or no,
No,
actually.
Adequacy.
I've had 8 right.
You got one word. Good job.
I'll
So,
second.
all right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Is that it, Linda?
Yes.
Good, thank you. All right, we didn't have any financials from personnel, correct? No. So financials from building, committee recommends, and I so move, the board approves plots on lots in the amount of $15,770 for the seal coat and lining.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Committee recommends, and I so move, the board approved, the committee approved the infield grooming system from Turf Products in the amount of $29,656.25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Boyer?
Just want to clarify that's a bonded item.
Correct. Mr. Todd, that's correct, right?
Correct, yes,
Thank you.
CIP bonded line 22401.
Thank you, sir. So we have a motion, second, discussion, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Committee recommends, and I so move, the committee will approve streamlined waterproofing and caulking in the amount of $98,528 for the high school caulking and windows and expansion joints.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And lastly, from building was the pest control bid from Rentico, how do you say it?
Rent-a-kill.
Rentico, North America, in the amount of $17,730 for a 3-year contract.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, that was it, right?
Just a zero bid for each.
Oh, the zero, I'm sorry, yes, thank you very much.
And lastly is the bid for $0 to EEI for the engineering of air quality.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Passes. Okay, that is it for the building. Do we have anything from 5-year? Nothing fiscal, right? No. Anyone from public comment? Nope. Anything under other?
I do have one other.
Oh, cool, I love others.
So, a few of you reached out to me after, there was an article in Foster's recently about a possible consortium virtual school. So, Dr. McDonald and I did attend a meeting. We wanted to find out more about it. We didn't know the news article was going to go out because it was more of an informational conversation. The consortium is made up of many different school districts, all just inquiring how they may try to work together to possibly provide a remote option. As you all know, it was very, very difficult to do 2 models and staff it appropriately on both sides. So this was a financial document that was just updated the other day. In theory, philosophically, I think this is a good thing. Practically and legally, right now, I have some concerns. Right now, we have a lot of special education questions that have yet to be answered, which would incur lots and lots of dollars that we were talking about earlier that we don't necessarily have and can't forecast. The other thing is you look about the cost breakdown, no matter if we fill our seats or not, we have to pay for the seats. The only thing you can do is you could actually sell your seat to another district, but there's no guarantee that they would have a student to take that seat. So for instance, if we had 30 seats and we only had 10 kids, we're still paying the other 20 seats regardless if no one's there. And I don't think, fiscally, I would support that off on the tax base. But like I said, in philosophy, I think this is a valid attempt. Initially, when they started to talk about this, I saw this as like a 2-year process, like 1 year research and development, talking about it, and they expedited it to try to hit the ground running the start of the school year. And because there are so many question marks right now yet to be determined, I don't think it makes sense to get in to that type of agreement. I don't need a motion or anything, but I just wanted to bring this to the board's attention or the committee's attention to let them know this was talked about, these are the finances behind it. And
I'm going to first say thank you for sharing with us. I'm of the same mindset as you are. I'd like you to still keep a pulse on how this evolves and what we're hearing from feedback, because it's something we have to eventually look at. Assessing that might be important. So if any of these guys decide to pull the trigger, keep tabs on if it's successful or not successful, what their struggles are. Mr. Nicholson?
I think it's a great idea also doing some type of, almost like a VMAX or like a Rochester style thing of it, or the group that we have here. It's not something we should go fast at though, because when we went fast into remote the last time, we should spend some time thinking about how can we do it correctly. Like you said, the special ed, everything else needs to be done correctly and not just haphazardly as we had to the last time.
I agree.
We go in voluntarily instead of forced.
No, I agree, and that's one of those, our system was built so well that we had that ability to flip the switch and really adapt, and what we learned and what we evolved to is pretty substantial. I agree with you that it's something we shouldn't just put on the back burner, but something 5 years should keep an eye on, like where are we digitally between K-5 and high school, or 5, 6, 7, so 6, 7, 8, so it should be something we continue to discuss, I agree. Mr. Boyer?
All right, so I'll ask the question of the day. All right.
What is this again?
So again, there was a kind of a movement with a few area superintendents that wanted to try to create, as Mr. Nicholson just mentioned earlier, you think about VLAX. VLAX is a virtual online school
So
that is K-12.
regional.
Right? Yep.
Okay.
So this consortium wanted to do that model, but have it more locally controlled. And this is only K-8, this what they're trying to do is K-8. And they were trying to build in some things that people shared as concerns when they had VLAX. So you can see at the very top, there's a student learning advocate. So that would be an employee, someone would apply for that job. And so those K-8 students would have this advocate to work with them. who lives locally, it's not somebody from another state or anything, and could check in on them. So, again, you see those built-in costs and different things to make it happen. And again, like I said, in philosophy, I think it's a great idea. I think practically right now with the unknowns and the financial responsibility, I think it's probably not the right time.
Agree 100%. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that topic? Okay, seeing none. Anything else under other? Okay, well, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That's it, we're all done.